More than 500,000 children could die from famine in Somalia if more is not done to get them food. The UN's World Food Programme is working tirelessly to provide aid to entire regions of people displaced by drought and conflict. But the numbers affected are growing, and the world's climate and food crises are being felt most acutely.
The situation is very dire. 7.7 million Somalis have been affected. Majority of them are young people, children, and elderly people. And closer to the 1 billion was displaced by the drought. The livestock are dying. Over 3 million livestock dead already. There is a 4 consecutive failure reason in Somalia. The fifth one is not promising well. That's due to of the climate change. So we are facing a huge humanitarian catastrophe if we don't get enough response or timely response, and we fail to deliver that.
The Somali Special Presidential Envoy for Drought Response has come to the United Nations General Assembly in New York to appeal for donors for a $1.6 billion humanitarian response plan. Abdul Rahman Abdi Shakur said the United States has already contributed 40% of the funds, and he's hoping to engage with Canada and European countries to get more support. High-level meetings are being held at the 77th session of the General Assembly to discuss food insecurity. There's a worsening humanitarian crisis in East Africa, the Horn of Africa and the Sahel, and global impacts from the Ukraine crisis, resulting in unprecedented levels of food insecurity. The UN says 345 million people don't have enough food around the world. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has brokered a deal for grain shipments from Ukraine and is pushing to lift obstacles to non-sanctioned ammonia exports from Russia for fertilizer. Secretary-General, you mentioned the real risk of multiple famines this year. If the grain shipments are not sufficient, if the ammonia doesn't help fertilizers soon enough, what else can and should be done, and how can you convince world leaders to help with that?
First of all, we need to mobilize all resources. In 2022, we have no lack of food. We have a problem of distribution. So what we have is to guarantee that there are effective mechanisms that allow developing countries with risk of famine to be able to have access to the food that is available.
As world leaders gather at the United Nations General Assembly in New York, food, energy and climate crises are forming unprecedented levels of hunger. Somalia is on the brink of humanitarian catastrophe, but famine is preventable, depending on the actions in these halls. Caroline Malone, CGTN at the UN headquarters in New York.